President Trump has urged the European Union to impose a 100% tariff on goods from both China and India. Why? Right? His rationale is basically he wants to pressure these major buyers of Russian oil to help choke off revenue for Putin's war machine. Well, that's the story. Well, but that's not the real story. What's really going on is that the current administration is trying to put a wedge whenever they can between China and whomever is getting closer to China. Okay. We're first talking about India, and we'll talk about India after because I have 4 stories for you. But essentially, what the current administration is doing is saying to the European, well, just 100% tariffs. But at the end of the day, 100% tariffs is not going to be very helpful because it's impossible for them to apply 100% tariffs on goods from both China and India. Right? In return, the U.S. has signaled readiness to match any such tariffs if Europe joins in. Be with me. Share my interest. Are they going to do that? The administration is putting everyone on notice here, and in a very strong notice. A notice that's basically pushing them to make choices. And European Union is doing a lot of business with China. Of course, you're not going to come out and say, I want you to be closer to me than to them, right? So you have to use a reason. And the reason that's being used is that basically India and China are buying oil from Russia, and that's obviously helping them to keep on fighting the war with Ukraine. So obviously I want to stop a war. So that you could understand that. But that's not the reason why the U.S. is doing that with the allies, because what they're asking for is almost impossible. They want to at least create tension between those groups. That's the idea of the 100% tariffs. I mean, basically, when you say 100% tariffs, you say don't do business with them. That's what you're saying. And it's if you do that, then I'll do it. Then you do first. Okay. So, but why would you ask such a strong ask? Well, because the situation is very dear. The situation is very dire. Is very important for the U.S. to be able to essentially put a wedge between any countries and China. China, unfortunately, is the ultimate goal. The idea is to keep China as isolated as possible, and obviously closer to the U.S. That's a geopolitical situation. When you're asking, when the president is asking the European Union to impose 100% tariffs on goods from both China and India, you're basically saying don't do business with these people, which they know that's not possible. Right? They're not going to do that. But they will, the fact alone that they're not saying no, right? The administration has also called for Europe to end purchases of Russian oil, calling these purchases direct funding on the war in Ukraine, and is framed as a broader strategy to economically isolate Russia and by extension pressure its major supporters. And again, trying to keep Russia away from China. And essentially, in discussion with Ukraine, President Zelensky, Trump stated that the U.S. would help guarantee Ukraine's security in the event of a peace deal. While details weren't specified, the gesture signals continued U.S. involvement. So at the end of the day, the U.S. is also trying to get Ukraine this peace deal, but they really don't want to offer that much strong security guarantee. Trump emphasized the deterrent value of increased NATO defense spending. European nations, especially via the coalition of the willing, have solidified commitment to post-war security for Ukraine through land, sea, and reassurance. So basically what's happening is the Europeans are saying, okay, fine. All right, I got you. What we're going to do is we're going to take our armies, well, our soldiers, let's say, and we're going to put our soldiers in the middle between Ukraine and Russia to help for that security buffer. as long as we have a peace deal. Now, Russia, as I said earlier, basically said, you put any soldiers in there, we'll shoot them. Okay. In fact, today they did some excursion in Poland. Russia did some excursion in Poland today, and that was very interesting. And they got in there, and they got shut down. Maybe they were testing Poland, but we'll have a separate live on that. But basically, what's happening is the fact that the Europeans are saying, okay, fine, President Trump, we have decided to follow your lead, and we are going to put the soldiers in the middle. So what is the U.S. saying? Well, what they said was, okay, let's, fine, I'll provide some security guarantees, but I want, you know what I want? I would like you to also impose a 100% tariffs on goods from both China and India. Right. That's what I want to do as well. So the U.S. is playing two games. At the same time, it told the European to come over to the U.S. Let's decide security guarantee. They wanted to know, what do you mean by security guarantee? What do you mean? And the U.S. Said, well, you know, we can't have troops on the ground, but we certainly could help you out with logistics and things like that. And they say, okay, fine, let's do it. So now they got together and they say, we'll put some troops. Now they're going to the U.S. and saying, okay, so what are you going to do? And I have to say that right now, the President Trump has urged the European Union to impose 100% tariffs on goods from China and India. Oh, well, what about the security guarantee, right? The U.S. said they would help guarantee Ukraine's security in the event of a peace deal. While details weren't specified, the gesture signals continued U.S. involvement. I'm in it, but I'm not that in it until I want more from you, right? And basically, I think the strategy from a geopolitical point of view from the U.S. is to basically force a lot more from the European, because the Europeans, they are not going to get in there, if the U.S. is not, quote unquote, protecting them. But the U.S. is basically saying, yeah, we'll fly over, we'll help you out, but we're not going to put troops on the ground, and we need a peace deal. And the European is saying, well, but once we have a peace deal, will you help us out? And he says, well, actually, what I also want, and I want you to impose a 100% tariffs on goods from both China and India. The rationale, because these are major buyer. Hello, Rupi McKay. These are major buyer of Russian oil that will help choke off revenue for Putin's war machine. So I think what the U.S. is doing from a geopolitical point of view, they are roping everything into one big picture. And remember, this is not really about Ukraine. This is not about the Ukraine and the war in Ukraine. I think this is more about trying, well, obviously, when you're speaking to people, you're not going to tell them, well, I want to keep everyone away from China. Okay? You're not going to say that. What you're going to say is, I need a reason. Well, the reason that I'm going to use is the following. I'm going to tell them that I want them to stop buying oil from Russia, right? So that by doing that, they will help stop a war. And you don't want people to die, don't you? Right? That's what he's saying. That's what the U.S. administration is saying. But what do they really mean? What they mean, especially when you say a number like 100% tariffs and being not non-committal in terms of exactly what you mean by security guarantee for Ukraine. Now, of course, people are getting excited about, oh, Ukraine, we have to help them. Yes, of course, war is no good. But you have to understand that these countries do not have friends or foes. They have interests. They want to make sure that their interest is protected. That's what they're looking for. They want their interest to be protected. And the U.S. basically wants to protect its interest against China, which is highly dependent on China right now. And frankly, so is India. and so is Europe, right? China is an industrial machine that's building so many things, that's producing, that people need to buy, and everyone becomes dependent on China. And as you've seen very recently, there were all three. We had China and and India and Russia together. That's a little bit worrisome when they get that close. The U.S. has tried very hard to keep India away from China. Try to go to Russia. Now everyone is making a big deal that, well, there's no. He said he was going to make a peace deal with Russia and he can't do it. That's not the ultimate goal, right? This is the ultimate goal. Has nothing to do really with Ukraine. The U.S. is trying to protect its interests. That's what they do. That's what these people think about all day. That's what I'm thinking about all day. What does it all mean? And how is this going to impact you? How is it going to impact the stock market from a geopolitical point of view? Right? You got to worry about these things because, frankly, today, for example, Russia flew over Poland. Okay, now Poland is a NATO country. Some drones, and they got shot down. It's a warning. What are they doing? No, what Russia is saying is that no, we didn't fly them over Poland. Yes, they were over Poland. It's just that they were the electronic by Ukraine, the electronic malfunction. Basically they send electronic signals to stop the plane, or in this particular case, the drones. It's because of Ukraine that the drone lost their sight, and those drones went over Poland, and therefore you had to shoot them. We never went to go over Poland. You see how these things get started very quickly? We didn't do it. It's Ukraine's fault because they were protecting the airspace using electronic surveillance and disruption mechanism. Of course, this is a way for you to test, right? This is a way for you to test how Poland is reacting. Now, what's the idea behind what Russia is doing? Maybe they didn't mean to do it. Do they really want to invade Poland? I mean, that's not the point, right? I mean, there's no way they're going to invade Poland. But they're testing, right? And don't forget, right now, Russia is a war machine. It's a very huge, large war machine. And if you think for 1 second that you could tell them, okay, lay off of Ukraine and stop being a war machine, good luck. It could take 1 to 2 years. Don't forget, all these people are building weapons all day long. And these people quit their job as a teacher to start making weapons. Now you tell them, don't make weapons, go back to teaching. Right? There was a huge influx of money. Now, at the end of the day, also what's happening is we're not so sure if Russia is able to continue being just a war economy. I mean, you got to make stuff besides. So that's the first thing. The second thing that you need to realize is right now, the Russia is basically potentially testing what's happening in Poland. And now imagine, right? Imagine if Europe comes in and decides to put those soldiers in between Ukraine and Russia. Russia already said, you put any soldiers, non-Ukraine soldiers in the middle, we will shoot them as well. Okay, and of course the Europeans are saying, well, we're not going to do it unless there's a peace. There's a peace deal, and the U.S. is. So that means nothing is going to happen. Essentially, there's no way all these things are going to fit in. But my point being is this: be very careful, because this is how war's starting. A war could start just because of that. And they're all armed to the teeth, except the European, although they're catching up. The U.S., it's not called the War Department, but quite frankly, the U.S. hasn't won a war in a long time. And is it really ready for sustained amount of fighting? I know we're talking about war and fighting. You say, what are you talking about? Does that make any sense? Well, I don't know. Today, I hate to tell you, but there was some Russian drone that had been shot over Poland. And they got shot down, But you know what you do when you want to know what's going on and you want to test everyone's results, you just sent a mistake and let's see what happens. And it got shut down, and that's the end of it. So it's not the most obvious thing to do, quite frankly, and that's something to worry about.